Final Fantasy X-3. What's good, my fellow peasants? How you all doing? So at long last, I'm getting round to doing this video that I promised, because it was about 3 or 4 months ago that we had news. And for a long time, I've said that I think X-3 could happen. And there's kind of this stigma that if you say you think X-3 could happen, or that you want it to happen, you're kind of called crazy. You're delusional. I'm going to come out and say it, guys. I think you're delusional if you don't think X-3 could happen. And the reason for that is it was about 3 or 4 months ago, Shinji Hashimoto himself, he came out and said that he is very much aware of the expectations surrounding X-3. He's also aware of how well 10 and 10.2 did in the market. Now that was his quote. And remember, I then did that infographic video. And this is no joke, guys. Look at the numbers. Final Fantasy X made Square Enix the biggest profit out of any Final Fantasy. So he said that he's aware of all of that, and while the teams are busy right now on other projects, so like the 7 remake and 15, we should wait a little longer to hear about development regarding X-3. Oh my goodness, now does that sound like it is delusional to believe that X-3 could happen? Hell no, guys. Shinji Hashimoto has teed it, he has queued it up. But getting on to this video, what will X-3 be? If it does happen, and do I think it should happen? Now, I'm really torn on this subject. I can 100% see the viewpoint that a lot of people have, that Final Fantasy X does not need a 3rd installment, and it simply does not, guys. It really doesn't. 10 was a fantastic game. You know, guys, I love 10.2. It's my 3rd favourite FF. I know, shoot me, pull my pants down and spank my ass. I just love it. Okay, I did. I love that game. But 10.2 ended perfectly. It rounded off the story completely, and really X-3 is not necessary. So when I say that I would like X-3, that's simply because I'm a sucker, guys. I have said that about every Final Fantasy. When Final Fantasy 9 ended, when 8 ended, when 6 ended, I can never let a game go. When those credits roll, the first thing that comes into my mind when I'm sitting there with tears rolling down my eyes and feels bursting out of my soul, I just think, oh my god, I wish this story could continue. So that's just me, guys. That's me personally. I would really love to see the story of Yuna and Tidus continue, and to see Spirit again, because the 10 series was just phenomenal. The world, I absolutely love it. The whole Bali, Indonesia, and just the lore of 10 was fantastic. So the thought that we could go back into Spira, I just can't resist it, because I'm a sucker, and I admit that. But going on to, what would X-3 be? Now, I want to dispel a lot of notions. So we know that there is the 2.5 Novella, and we know that there is the audio drama wheel, and this is what I want to talk about in this video, guys. If they do a X-3, it will be 100% based on either the novella or the audio drama wheel. And it's just a fact, guys. I mean, they add it into the game. That is canonical. They have left the game on a canonical cliffhanger. Now, I don't care what you think about the audio drama. You can say it sucked, you can say it was shit. The fact it is there, and it is canonical, means that, yes, Sin has returned. The way that the story has left off, you can pretend that Sin is still dead, but he just isn't. The story has been reopened. So the fact it is on that cliffhanger, the likelihood that X-3 will be based on that is very high. I know there's been a lot of people who've said they would like a prequel, so an Oranject and Braska story. And that would be really dope, I admit, but no, I just don't think it will happen. But I'm going to now go into the audio drama and the novella. This is going to be a 2-parter. I'm going to start with the novella, the 2.5 novella, because I'll just say, guys, both the audio drama and the novella get a hell of a lot of hate. And I know that some of you are going to go hit the dislike button for saying this, but I actually think they have some brilliant concepts, and I actually really enjoy them. And for all the people who say, I hate this, the typical one is, oh, this sounds like a shit fan fiction. And I'll admit that in the novella, you can kind of get away with saying that, but it doesn't detract that there are good concepts. But the core reason why both get hate is because people don't actually know the story. Both the 2.5, every time someone has said that they don't want it, I've asked them, what is the 2.5 novella about? They haven't been able to tell me. They don't actually know. They heard something about Tidus's head blowing up and something about an island, but that's about as much as they can tell me. So I'm gonna bust these wide open, guys. I'm gonna tell you the exact story of what happens, why I like it, and at the end of these 2 videos, you can decide whether you would like X-3 to happen. So buckle up, you're gonna need a seatbelt. Let's go! So the 2.5 novella, let's start there. Written and published in Japan by Nojima himself. And before I want to continue, I just want to say there was so many rumours that this was not canonical. There was this huge rumour that circulated for years that Nojima accidentally sent off a fanfiction, somebody else's fanfiction. He sent it through the post, the wrong package, and that they actually published someone else's fanfiction by mistake, but that they liked it and they decided to stick with it. Now that rumour, I'm just going to say, is total bullshit. It was actually made up by P4 Gramming, a site renowned for making up complete bullshit, and they did not send off a fanfic and accidentally published thousands of copies. In fact, they're still selling it on Amazon to this day. It's total nonsense, so I repeat, 2.5 is canonical and it was written by Nojima himself. But getting into exactly what happens, now this is really hard for me to do. Of course, I've never read it myself. There is actually no translation. There's bits and pieces, there's snippets, but this was all done in Japanese and there was never really a release here in the West, so I can't comment on exactly, but going into the core concepts, and I've researched this pretty heavily, but from what we do know, it focuses on a far more real side of Yuna and Tidus' relationship, and it gets pretty gritty, guys. It is less of the pie in the sky magical wonderful romance that we saw. Now, in 10 and 10-2, it was a magical romance and we didn't really have to see the relationship side. But you know what, I'd really like to see it. And the really phenomenal thing about the 2.5 novella, and this blew my mind away, is that it actually takes place in between the events of the Bhed Island reunion and the Zanarkand perfect ending. I know, guys, in between this scene here and this scene here, this is when the novella takes place. Now, I can barely believe that, guys, because what happens in the novella, to think they actually were squeezed in between those two scenes is crazy. So let me get into it. Yuna and Tidus reunite. They spend some time together, but one of the first things they do after reuniting and wanting to take a break, because Spira is obsessed with them, especially with Yuna. She is the high summoner who saved the world. So they decide to get away and they decide to take a boat and go sailing around the world. It's beautiful, it's romantic, and they set a course for the boat. But supposedly they get distracted by going below deck and having the sexings. I know, guys, they do go there. Now, of course, we're not going to see it, but their relationship does go to third base. Now, while that's happening, something unnatural happens in the weather cycles. Their boat gets tossed and battered around, and they get stuck out in the middle of the ocean. Tidus dives into the water after Yuna, after she gets thrown off the boat, to try to save her from drowning. And with the last ounce of his strength as he tries to hold her head above the waves, he passes out. Then he comes back into consciousness and the last thing he sees is, quote, a giant ject, so Braska's final Aeon ject in his Braska Aeon form, holding Yuna in his giant hand. So the story continues. They wake up on an island and Tidus and Yuna, they wander around the island trying to gather their bearings, get their heads straight and create a plan of action. They walk about and hostiles on the island supposedly later appear. Down the line, after a few days, Tidus gets something thrown at the back of his head. He turns around angrily. It's a leathery brown round ball and he kicks it. And it does explode. So that's the true story, guys. There was a lot of speculation that he just walked onto this island, saw a ball, ran up and kicked it. No, someone throws it at the back of his head, he turns around and boots it angrily. And I do believe that Yuna and Tidus were having some sort of argument at this point, or just before this, in the heated, stressful situation. I've researched this heavily, and a person who did interpret a hell of a lot of the novella said that there was no report whatsoever about Yuna waking up to Tidus's decapitated head. Because that was the other thing, the other part of the rumour, that apparently he blows up and his head lands next to her. Supposedly that was never in there. There was no even mention of it. What actually happens is Tidus explodes, Yuna sees it from afar, she passes out, and then when she comes to seeing the last remnants of Tidus's body fading off into fireflies. So this is pretty heavy, I will admit. This is going heavy and hard at the start of this novella. But of course, remember, this takes place before the Zanarkand perfect ending. So it's not all doom and gloom from here on out, so let me continue. Yuna then wanders the island alone for a couple of days. until she learns that is actually inhabited and home to a millennium-old unsent summoner called Johit, Johit. And we learn a hell of a lot of stuff from him, and this is where it gets super exciting, and the part of this novella I really do like. Johit actually reveals that the Bhed being outcasts, the whole thing was artificially engineered. It was engineered by the holy guys over at Bhed. Not only did they cast the Bhed out and curse them, they actually forced them to learn a new language. They forbid them from speaking the common tongue. That's why the Bhed have a different language. It was all artificially engineered. And the Bhed, they were actually once called the Bedols Ibstead. He also reveals that summoners are way more powerful than 10 or 10.2 even remotely showed. Honestly guys, the summoners have been using a fraction of their power. He reveals that what the summoners can actually do is pretty much total control over fireflies, even more control than what the summoners were using, not just by sending the fireflies, by doing the dance, actually pretty much control them. And Yuna, even before this point, before she even meets Johit, her summoner powers already start progressing, and that's why Johit decides to teach her, because Yuna actually admits that she's able to send souls without doing the dance anymore. She doesn't actually need to do the dance, and in fact for the last few years she's been doing the dance just for show. She can perform the rites standing perfectly still, but Johit then tells her a summoner at their absolute highest level, she's not even remotely close to it yet, they can create pretty much, not only control the fireflies, but they can create something out of nothing. They can actually control the fabric of reality. They can create things out of nothing. Yuna then asks for an example. She asks him, could she make a boat from nothing then to sail off of this island? Johit says yes, but not to do it. And she asks why, and Johit says that it's doing something like that, creating something from nothing, is a tremendous amount of power, and it stresses the hearts of the Aeons to do such things, and therefore should be avoided at all costs, unless it's absolutely necessary. But remember guys, I said that one of the powers that they can do is total control over fireflies, and that means guys, reincarnation. Yes, just like the Faith, they reformed Tidus, and they pretty much did that through fireflies and through his memories that they carried over. Yuna can do the same thing. No doubt Yuna doesn't wait a second. She learns from Johit and she reforms Tidus with that power, and the story continues on. The perfect ending supposedly then happens. The last mission also happens, the one with Riku, Pain, and Yuna, where they go off and they kind of reform their relationship. And a year then goes on after that, passes on, everything seemingly to go well. Tidus appears to be back just like he was before, and that's why in the audio drama wheel it opens with, me and Yuna had a year together and it was wonderful, something like that. So now you're beginning to see the timeline guys, but every use of power has a cost, peasants. We know that in Final Fantasy, and Johit warned her. He said that doing something like that does stress the heart of the Aeons and that it would come with a cost, and Yuna has pushed the limits of what a summoner should do in order to resurrect Tidus, and with that comes the problems. Now Tidus never finds out what Yuna did on the island that day, and the reason for that is because if he remembers, it will be game over. This actually gets explained by Johit through his own story. He had a love triangle, I think it was something like 2,000 years ago, so even before the Xanakid era. And his love triangle, it was back with a female called Kushu, who also had a thing for another guy called Bria. So there was Bria, Kushu was the female, and Johit, and they were in this love triangle. Bria, he was a guardian, just like Waka and Lulu, and he dies in his service. And Kushu, she brings him back the same way that Yuna does. And it has the same consequences. Bria, he's not supposed to remember, but after hundreds of years, his memories slowly, piece by piece, begin to reform themselves. As he slowly remembers, he begins to fade and disappear bit by bit. It's kind of like the same illness, and in fact it is the same illness. The one that Tidus is suffering in the audio drama, which we're going to get onto, he's ill in that audio drama, and it's for the exact same reason, piecing bits of memory slowly and getting sicker and sicker as a result. So that's the difference guys. When the Faith brought back Tidus, they brought him back whole and they brought him back healthy. And that's why when Tidus, he is able to remember what happened. He knows that he went off and fought Braska's final Aeon, and they went and they fought Lady Yuna Leska, and they went and they killed Yuyev, and he remembers all of that. Because when the Faith brought him back, it wasn't the same way that Yuna has brought him back with reconstructing Fireflies. So here's where the issue is. This is why Tidus gets sicker, because he's not allowed to remember what Yuna did. And she's not allowed to tell him what she did. And you can imagine the stresses that puts on their relationship. You can imagine that, Tidus, he's fairly clued on, he's fairly intuitive, and Yuna, we know that she was a bad liar. I think even in the game, in a cute moment, I think Tidus said that she's a bad liar, and you can imagine the stress that's put on Yuna, having to not tell him. And this is what I'm talking about, guys. This is where we start to see some grit to their relationship, some real issues. And that's pretty much as I can dig up on the novella. There was actually one small detail I picked up on. Apparently they do talk about this. There's something called a sex pact. And I think this is probably where it sounds a bit fanfiction-y. For a summoner to reach their highest levels of power, they do need to make a sex pact with a person. So I think it's kind of basing it off again. I think Nojima's going for the similar kind of idea that who would become a summoner's final Aeon when they summoned, when they defeated Sin. It had to be the person who was closest to them. But the thing is, beating Sin was very, very easy. It was not much of the summoner's power at all. Like I say, guys, it's only a fraction of what a summoner can truly do. For a summoner to go that extra step further, just like they have that link with their final Aeon, that link has to be deeper. So they do have to have been physically intimate, and that's why Yuna can do it, because of that boat scene when they get marooned and they go below deck and they bonk each other's brains out. So I'm telling you guys, it is in there. Honestly, I'm not making this shit up, but there is a hell of a lot of inaccuracies, and there is a hell of a lot of translation issues, and this has taken me about 15 hours to really research this in depth, as much as I can. So the common negatives to the novella. One, we have the pointless reopening of a story, and again, like I said, guys, that is fairly legit. No, if any game doesn't need reopening, it's 10. It contradicts its own lore. Now, that's what some people have said, that the novella contradicts its own lore. This is a funny point that I've seen a lot, but the reason why some people say it contradicts its own lore is because of the Yuna bringing back Tidus, reincarnating him. That contradicts itself. They couldn't do that in 10 and 10.2. It wasn't a summoner's power. But, guys, it's a new power. It's a new story. And in fact, it does make sense. People's spirits, people's souls, people's entire beings are constructions of fireflies. So the fact that summoners can do a dance and send the fireflies, I don't think it's beyond imagining that a summoner with the full capability and capacity of the power unlocked, they could control the fireflies in other ways, reincarnate someone or reconstruct someone from fireflies. So I really don't get that point. I don't agree with it that this contradicts its own lore at all. The other one is Tidus' death is stupid. How could you mistake a bomb for a blitzball? He blows up. That is so dumb. Come on, guys. It was brown, leathery, and it was thrown at the back of his head and he turned around and kicked it. I mean, shit, have you never kicked anything? I have. I remember when I was 8, I was in my mate's garden. He pissed me off. I booted a stick at him, and it was actually his dog's massive shit. And I was wearing open-toed sandals, and my parents told me off, why would you kick shit? And I said I thought it was a stick. That's the true story, guys. So, I mean, it happens, okay? Shit happens, literally. And so do leathery round things disguised as bombs, clearly. The other one is, this trivializes death. Tidus blowing up and coming back again, it trivializes death. This is Final Fantasy X and 10.2. How can you sit there and go, this is the thing that trivializes death? If you're a person who doesn't like death being trivialized, then I'm sorry, but you must hate 10. Because look who came back. Not only did you have Seymour come back, 3 times? Oren came back. I mean, the number of people who come back in Final Fantasy X and 10.2 is insane. Shuyin, Len, they are unsent. Yes, death is trivialized in the world of Spira. Souls can come back, people can be reincarnated, people can appear on the far plane. It just happens, guys. This is what Spira is about. And yes, death is trivialized, but personally, I don't care about it, but that's just some complaints I've seen. And rounding out this video, before we move on to the next bit, so what do I think of this novella? I don't mind it. I definitely like the audio drama. You're going to hear me fangirl about that. I think that is fantastic. I know I'm going to get some hate for that, but I do. But this novella bit, focusing on that. Yes, there are parts that might come across as fanfiction, and I can even admit yeah, there's some bits I'm not too keen on. But I do like the base concepts. I like the core concepts. And here's the thing, guys. I have no doubt that if they do 10.3, they will rewrite the story. It will look different. Nojima is going to craft this into a different story. It'll probably end up looking completely different. It's not set in stone. So anything that's written here, expect there to be slight story changes. But I like the base concepts that Yuna becomes. She transcends to a whole other level of summoner that we haven't seen. I like that her powers have slowly been growing. But I also like that Yuna and Tidus, the whole thing with their grittier relationship, I like that we're going to see more time in 10.3 of them together actually as a relationship. Come on guys, who doesn't want to see Yuna and Tidus as an actual relationship? Overcoming issues and hardships, and just the base concepts of going back into some of the really ancient lore of Spira. Back to the owl beds, and even pre-Zanarkand 1,000 years ago. How the Zanarkand War actually built up. Honestly, I just can't get enough of Spira. I just can't. The dream will never end. So there it is, guys. Let me know what you think. Hopefully I've explained something that you didn't know about the story. What do you think about it? This is why I want to do this in 2 videos. So in the comment sections, let me know something that you think about the novella. Thanks for watching, Peasants and Peasettes, and the audio drama part should be coming up in a day or 2 from uploading day. So give me a while to do that. But all I'll say, and I must stress, is I do prefer the audio drama. I don't think that this 2.5 novella will be 10.3. I've got to stress that. It's actually far more likely that it will be from the audio drama. It will be set during then and the events that follow after that. But saying that, although I think it will be set during that, I don't think that it's beyond likely that there's going to be flashbacks to the 2.5 novella. And the reason for that is because the stories, they do tie. They connect. The reason why Tidus is ill in the audio drama is because of the secret happening in the novella. And also, although it's not confirmed, but it's strongly speculated, the entire reason why the far plane is in disturbance in the audio drama is because of what Yuna did, and she overstressed the hearts of the Aeons. But we will cover all of that in the next video. Honestly, it just feels so good to speak about FF10 again and do a video on it. FF10, 10.2, Yuna, Tidus, Lulu, Wakamari, Oren, Riku, Spira, Yevon, Bhed. It's so good to talk about it. I love FF10. I love the franchise. I love the series, and I know it makes me an arsehole for asking for them to be one more entry in this series when it's not necessary, but I'm asking for it. I want it. Do it, Square Enix. Do it. Do it. Final Fantasy X-3. Do it. Until the next video, Kumo!
DJ.